Well, here we are near the end of week 3. I say near the end because this is actually the 21st, but the end of week 3 is actually going to be tomorrow at the end of our total solar day. We're at our total solar day right now, and we're producing now a bit more than the home is using on a daily basis. I'll get those numbers for you when I do a recap back in the studio. But for right now, we're back at 100%. We've been charging for several days. We had a real good day of clear sunshine. Again, once we're back in the studio, I'll go over how the power production has changed from today to just back on January 1st. And we'll kind of go from there. But for right now, let's put the house in zombie apocalypse mode. I honestly don't think that'll ever get old. Okay, here we are just shy of 24 hours since we set the system into zombie apocalypse mode yesterday. And we've got another lesson that the system has to teach us. So we're sitting right now at 98% or so. We're nearing the end of our total solar day. And so as you remember, yesterday when we ended our total solar day, we were at 100%. So in that 24-hour period, we've now recovered all that the home had used in that previous 24-hour period. That's the great news. The not so great news is that if the system is in its backup mode, that you have to be very careful when you start to get up towards that 98% region. What'll happen is that the system will say, oh, I'm full, and it'll start to throttle off. And so there's no way currently for the batteries to send a signal to throttle this down. In other words, if you don't produce quite so much power, it's an all or nothing deal. So when it gets close to 100%, it goes, no, shut it off. Because it had no way to put that excess power out to the grid. And so that brings us up to an interesting thing that I was going through yesterday. When we were at 100%, just before I had engaged the zombie apocalypse mode, the system started sending out burping power out to the grid. Okay, well, so then I messed around and put some to the car and diddled around with that for a little while. But you can't just sit there and turn the car up and turn the car down, and the house is always fluctuating, and so it's always burping some power out to the grid. So that brings us an interesting point about the new Tesla chargers. Now the new Tesla chargers are really interesting. They're designed to speak to one another if you have more than one charger. So let's talk just for a minute about the way that the Tesla automobiles charge. So everybody's probably familiar with the level 1 chargers, level 2 chargers that they have for charging normal electric cars. You plug them in, the car's onboard systems deal with how it manages the charge. If the charge is up, it's full in the car, it'll go ahead and turn the battery chargers off. If the battery chargers in the car get too hot, it'll go ahead and throttle some of the current down. All that's done locally in the automobile, and that doesn't have to do with any communications. But when you supercharge, when you plug this car into a supercharger, the supercharger wants to know who plugged in. And so that's why you have to have a Tesla account in order to use the superchargers. Well, in that instance, the car communicates to the system. Well, Tesla said, well, if we're already having that system to do that with the superchargers, why not leverage that in a home charging situation? So if you have a Tesla automobile and you're using one of the new Tesla high output chargers, when you plug it into the car, it can communicate with that. It goes, oh, okay, I'm plugged into one car, one vehicle, knows what the vehicle is. So if you have another vehicle that's plugged in, it can go, oh, okay, well, I now have two vehicles. I know the state of charge of each of these vehicles. I know how much current I have available. So I'm going to go ahead now and prioritize the lower vehicle, bring it up, and then it can either bounce charge or, I'll get back to you on how the many ways that this can be programmed. But the point I'm trying to make is that it can communicate between the car or cars and multiple systems. Well, Tesla, if you're listening, wouldn't it be cool if you could make it so that this new style charger could communicate with the gateway? That would be really neat. I think that that's probably the direction that folks are going to wind up going to in the future, especially Tesla. I mean, they've got basically all the hardware that they need to do it. They probably need to modify the gateway a little bit so that there's an extra port there so that they can be connected physically to one another to communicate. But back to the trouble that we had yesterday and the trouble that we're having now, is that if the car can communicate with the charger, then as the home loads vary up and down, and as solar varies up and down, it can go ahead and take all of the excess power and put it into the car, because it's got someplace else to put it, other than deciding whether or not it's going to shut off or not shut off. And so I thought that would be kind of an interesting thing to pass on just here while we're at the system before we go back over to the studio. But let's head over there and discuss the close of week 3. Okay. Welcome to week 3. Wow, rushing right along. So we'll do a quick recap of the early week, even though all of the exciting stuff really kind of happened in the last couple of days. But firstly, we had a whole series of nasty storms and strange weather. We actually even had a tornado warning here in the area, which was interesting. The tornado warning came through. I got a message on my phone from the National Weather Service, and it actually also didn't trigger the storm watch mode. However, it does kind of speak to what's likely the best part of this feature, the storm watch thing, if it ever actually works correctly. And that's disaster preparedness. So, like I said, I got a warning on my phone about the tornadoes in the area between Stockton and Sacramento. That's basically right where we are. And it probably should have triggered the power walls to start charging. Now, if you've only got 1 or 2 power walls, it's probably not going to help you a whole lot, but the project installation has 6 of them. And so even if a tornado had hit in our area in an hour later, it still would have put over 10 kilowatts into the system as a whole. And that's enough to get you through a cold evening, or it's enough to get about 30 kilowatts, 30 miles of charge in the car, and that's plenty to get us to the nearest supercharger if we had to get to a shelter or had to evacuate, that kind of a thing. So it would have been nice to have had the system do that, send me a push notification that said, hey, we're charging your batteries. You know, if you don't want to charge the batteries, you know, cancel the charge, that kind of thing. That, I think, is how it should have appropriately handled the situation. But anyway, so because of the storms, I knew that I needed to reserve some power in case the power went out. Like I mentioned in the previous video, we have some problems sometimes with rain and high winds. And so I had to set the reserve power to 100% so that it would then start to scavenge all of the solar power that we'd produced and put that into the batteries. But I also had to switch the grid power back on in order to do that. So I did that back on the 16th, and then from the 16th until now, basically we've been trying to replenish the batteries. So nothing really to report for early in the week, except that the system did perform really well, no unexpected issues. And then on the 21st at 4:30 p.m. we reached 100% charge, and then the system was put back into zombie apocalypse mode. So that means zombie apocalypse mode, by the way, for those who just joined us, that's what we're referring to as our off-grid mode. We actually turn the grid completely off. So that brings us to some interesting observations, as well as a rather lengthy
Zombie Apocalypse Mode special update.
So for our Zombie Apocalypse Mode special update, let's take a look at how the system has been acting over the last couple of days. So let me pull up this screenshot here. This is from the morning of the 23rd, and it shows the day of the 22nd, and that's kind of what I wanted to show here. So we've reached a time in the year where the production is actually exceeding our average use of the home. Things are kind of warming up. The home isn't spending as much time with the heater circulation fan on, and it's just gotten to that kind of a neutral time in the year. So our home usage is coming down into the high teens, low 20s as far as average daily use. We'll get a day or two where, you know, have some people over or do some chores or whatever, and that'll bump it up a little bit. But yeah, so that's been kind of interesting. So the thing to look at here on this screenshot is that because you wind up now bringing into the Powerwall more than you're discharging, you can get into that situation where you've charged the system so much that you've got no place to put the extra power, and the grid is shut off. And so then what happens is that the system kicks off. So let's watch a video on that from earlier. All right, so just a real quick bonus here. Here we are at the beginning of the daily production, and we're basically at the same spot we were yesterday, where we were at that 78-79% mark. As you can see from the figures that we showed, we withdrew 15 kilowatts over the past 24 hours, and in that solar day, and we put back in 17. And so basically we're right at the same point we were yesterday, where we ran out of headroom. And so in order to keep that from happening for the very first time, we're going to go ahead and put 2 kilowatts of power into the car. So what I've done is I've set the car to display energy instead of mileage for right now. And so what that allows me to do is it allows me to see exactly how much power I've put into the car. Like I was telling you earlier when we were first laying out the Energy Sovereignty Project, that most electric vehicles are very precise, well, all of them are very precise about not only how much power they bring in, but also how many miles they go. You don't see the kind of inaccuracies that you usually see with automotive odometers. And so because of that, and the Tesla specifically, the way that it displays all of the information, it allows us to very accurately keep track of what's going on with the vehicle. Now it's colder today, so it's going to be really interesting to see exactly how many physical miles I get out of those 2 kilowatts. But since this is technically the first day of week 4, you're all just going to have to wait until we do the updates next week, and then we'll see how many miles of driving we got, not only today but for the rest of the week. We'll see what those freeboard numbers looked like. And so what I want you to notice from the Powerwall in and out figures, this screenshot was taken at midnight. I stayed up to look at the numbers and to pretend that I was an AI algorithm, and what if I was looking at all of the information that I had there, what kind of a decision would I have made regarding that? And so there's 3 critical periods in making these calculations. The first is that pre-production time, where you are at the point where production is just about to start for the day. And then obviously the very important one, that total solar day. But then there's also the decision point, that 24-hour mark where the physical day is ending, and now you're going to have to start to make a decision. In other words, any system that is going to be looking at all of this information is then going to make a decision on what it's going to do during the next day. So again, calling this third point the decision point, because logically that's kind of where the system will crunch all of its data. And so in the above case, the system knows that it's overproduced, the previous day, that it's got all the information that it needs to know that the next day is going to be the same. And so the reality of that is really pretty simple. There's a 2 kilowatt disparity, all right? So what was it here again? So yes, 14.8, 15 kilowatts to 17. Pretty basic. The 2 kilowatts has to go someplace. And so when we close out this video, I put it in the car. And so for the first time, we're actually seeing a physical return, a physical payback on the system as it relates to transportation. So that'll be kind of interesting. So when the system is looking at this, one of the biggest factors at that midnight period, at that decision point, is this. So here is the forecast. So now as you can see, the forecast for the next week, next 5 days, it's great. Partially cloudy. Generally, again, we're going to wind up seeing production in that 24 to 26 kilowatt hour range, slightly increasing again as we continue on marching forward. The days keep getting longer and we keep getting more and more sunlight. Sun rises up higher and higher. So this is the kind of information that would be available to any mature system. The Tesla system in the future, they'll have access to all of this as well. They'll be able to say, okay, well, we've got rainy days coming in. Let's go ahead and charge the system, and that kind of a thing. And that's about it for what we have here. It's a great way to kind of close things off. Gives us something to look forward to next week as we close out our month. As I said before, when we close out the month, we'll go ahead and do a series where we show day by day what the system did every day this month. Folks that are interested in following along might be interested in crunching numbers and seeing how they apply to their own situation. We'll do that as a separate special video, so people who aren't interested in this don't have to sit through that. But the very last thing I'd like to close with is we had a couple of different subscribers comment about the vehicle, especially in how it relates to zombie apocalypse mode. They thought it would be really kind of interesting to see this time of year what we would have to do to get any mileage out if we were in an off-grid situation or in a situation where something had gone terribly wrong. And so I thought it might be kind of cute to come up with a test that we could do. So feel free to comment and let me know how folks might like to see that unfold. Maybe it takes the form of us imagining that we've had some kind of a calamity long term, and that now we have to take a 200-mile trip, 100 miles out, 100 miles back to get supplies or something of that nature. And then we can see how long would it take us to get the power to do that? How long would it take us to recover? Can we still run the home? That kind of a thing. So let me know in the comments, and we'll kind of pick it up there next week. And again, thanks everybody for following along with this. Thanks to all those who have contributed with their comments. They're very helpful. They help drive the content, especially now and moving forward as we're really starting to roll. And thanks again for joining us.